our next topic comes to us from Zachary.
All right, we are going to get a little more serious here. I was reading an article, and I tried for the life of me for probably an hour last night to find this article, and I couldn't. I want to say it was in the Wall Street Journal, possibly the Washington Post, possibly neither of those. Very good chance neither of those.
Probably a trunk.
Trunk. We'll talk about Tronk later. Somebody
Yeah,
should. But a journalist was raising the idea in the wake of the Charlotte protests of what is protest, and is there a line between protest and domestic violence that culture is becoming blind to in America? Domestic violence. Some are saying domestic terrorism.
Wow.
Well, I think there's a line between protesting, rioting,
There you go.
and then
Yeah.
rioting becomes the other.
Rioting becomes terrorism.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you think back in history, some of the most effective protests we've had, for example, Martin Luther King and his movement. Gandhi. Yeah. But looking back in America in the civil rights movement, there were kind of two main players, Martin Luther King and Malcolm X. Malcolm X was violent. He ended up dying violently, I believe.
Yeah.
Wow.
And yeah, we know the history of the other guy too, but it's a little different. But Malcolm X didn't have as much effect.
You
as Martin
don't
Luther
hear
King
as
Jr.
much
did.
about you learn about Malcolm X, but
Yeah.
not to the degree that
Right.
learn about Martin Luther King Jr.
Does he have a holiday?
Nope.
Malcolm X?
No,
Malcolm X?
I don't even think they
Leap
actually
year.
talk about
Leap
him.
day.
Is it really?
No,
Leap
I
day?
just made it up.
I don't think they even actually.
It should be.
Is he really even a part of like the African American History Month or anything?
I don't know. I believe they kind of put him out on the side because he was a violent protester.
He was very violent.
He did a lot of what Logan talked about with kind of more rioting than protesting and a little
Really?
bit of the domestic terrorism. But what do we think about that? Do we think that what's going on, especially in Charlotte, where, for example, some protesters decided to light an unconscious photographer on fire
See,
this past couple days? Is
that's-
that protesting or is that rioting and terrorism?
that's
Attempted murder.
that's
murder.
the thing, right?
If
Like,
not murder, yeah.
but the problem is you can't. There are people there. I would even say the majority of people there that show up just to protest,
Yep.
just to be there, just to be like, listen, we're not going to stand for this. You can't keep doing this. This is our way of showing this. And then you have the extremists who show up and incite the rioting. And once it gets started, and I don't think this is good, but some of those people that may not have done it start doing it, and it just
Yep.
gets progressively worse because then the police have to start fighting back. So then the protesters or rioters or whatever feel like they have to fight back, and it's just going back and forth.
Mob
Yeah.
mentality.
Mob mentality, it escalates the violence.
Yeah.
Yeah. For example, I saw a video on Facebook of this guy in Charlotte who was going around hugging police officers. And he was hugging them and trying to humanize the police force and recognizing that it was a sole officer who shot the person and it was not the entire police force.
Yeah.
And he was going around showing these police officers compassion, saying, I hope you're safe tonight, occasionally adding, I don't approve of what your colleague did, but I'm assuming you're a good person and you haven't done this. So I'm here to just show you that not all of us are bad.
Wow.
And that's incredible.
Yeah.
But also what's disgusting is that guy's friends were behind him just yelling disgustingly gross words at him. Like the protesters, his friends behind him, were hating this man for even thinking about being nice to the police.
That's sad.
That's sad.
I applaud whoever that is because it's hard to do that in general, but when all your friends hate you for it,
Yeah.
for loving someone, I can't imagine how hard that would be.
Yeah. It's
So-
got to be a difficult thing.
That's crazy.
Yeah. And they were arguing back and forth. Like he was trying to stay calm and reason with the guys yelling at him,
Yeah.
but they were just being terrible. So he just kept doing his thing, kept showing the police officers a little bit of mercy in that tough situation.
Well, and I mean, they're only out there doing their job.
Yeah.
That
They are.
The other guy or whatever, he what he did, they're not responsible for.
No.
You know,
Right.
you can't hold them accountable. You can't hold them any more accountable for what he did than you can hold the rioters. You can hold the regular protesters accountable for the actions of the rioters.
Yeah.
It reminds me of how Jesus treated the tax collectors in the ancient world, and those people were widely despised. Like, no one liked
were.
them. At least our cops have a lot of people on their side, but those tax collectors didn't. And he was followed around by Pharisees and Jews and all sorts of people who yelled at him for even talking to tax collectors like a civil person. So
Yeah.
it's just ridiculous that showing love is such a controversial action. I don't know how, but it can be.
It's a really powerful thing to do.
Really
Yeah,
is.
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah. If we look at the rights we have under the First Amendment to protest, First Amendment says verbatim the right to the right of the people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. So, do we have the right to assemble violently, or the right to go in and block a highway? I know that was a thing that was big over the summer, is protesters were blocking highways. Is that what we have a right to do and what we're protected as Americans to do?
I think you have a right to peaceful protest. I think even with the highway thing, I think that's disturbing the peace. I think that's, you're ruining someone else's day. You're doing whatever
Right.
just because you're upset about something, and to a degree, you're causing other problems. An ambulance may have needed to get to a hospital
Exactly.
that was on that highway, and they're stopping them from helping someone else. Does that make them any better than the police officer? I mean, I don't know. That's
Yeah. Are you fighting injustice with a new injustice?
exactly.
That's a tough call to make because protests in their nature are disruptive. That's the whole point, is to disrupt the status quo of how things are going, because for some reason or another people think that the status quo is wrong.
Right.
For instance, the work riots that we had, I don't know, 100 so years ago, I don't remember, but before labor laws were like a thing in the U.S., people just sat down in their factories because they weren't being treated right, and that was absolutely disruptive and messed up the economy and messed up a lot of manufacturing stuff, but we got labor laws and people aren't
Yeah.
mistreated as much anymore.
But did those people commit a crime by walking into work and sitting down on the job?
Exactly. Once you can protest, but as soon as it becomes violent, you're assaulting, you're breaking other laws, and once you start breaking other laws, you're no longer protected.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Violence is a hard line.
And
Definitely.
violence, I think the second it becomes violence, not a protest. I think that's the thing. People always get that confused. Violence isn't a protest. I think protests are nonviolent, whatever. I
Right.
think violence is a riot. The second it becomes violent, it's a riot. That's the whole difference.
Yeah.
There's
Go ahead.
no, you can go.
Oh, okay. I was going to say that I think examples uphold Logan's point. Because, like, we're recording this right now, September 24th. And I read that last night in Charlotte it was peaceful.
Really?
So it was. I don't believe anyone was hurt. No one was shot. It was a peaceful night of protesting. And I think that shows that, yes, people get caught up in the moment and they riot. They commit crimes. But that's not what lasts through it. The riots die down. The looting stops.
Yeah.
And the protesting is what ends up kind of willing out in the end.
Yeah.
The thing that I don't understand, though, and this happens all over, this happened in Ferguson, this happened in Charlotte, this happens everywhere.
Baltimore,
Baltimore,
Chicago,
Dallas, Chicago, everywhere. When riots start, how are you helping your cause by looting people around you?
See,
If you break into the barbershop of the guy that's just like you and is also at this protest and steal everything that he owns, how are you helping this cause? How are you protesting? What are you doing? You're just...
That's the thing,
Yeah,
is
that's a good point.
a lot of these people aren't even associating themselves with it. They just want to take advantage of the situation and steal stuff or break stuff or hurt people. And the sad part is that throughout history, a lot of these protests, including the ones that are going on now, have valid points that need to be listened to. Like, people have these hurts in their hearts and these stories that are going unheard because everyone's saying, well, look at how violent they're being. Like, we shouldn't listen to them. They have no credibility. But those aren't the people who are doing the real talking. Those are the people who are trying to take advantage of all this madness that is going on and breaking into places and stealing stuff.
Yeah.
Kokomo, my hometown, had tornadoes last month, I think. And my mom said she was standing outside her house, which was affected by the tornadoes, and there were people driving around, and she could tell they were looking, just driving around the block looking for stuff to steal, like stuff laying outside or people not in their houses or whatever. She said cops were driving around trying to prevent it, but it's just a thing people do. And in situations like this, people go around and they loot stuff. It's a fact.
I remember in Ferguson, the police were arresting people from sometimes 2 states away who would just come in to loot and to be violent in the protest to make things worse.
That's when, like, I don't understand how you can consciously make that decision to, well, they're having problems here and they're actually trying to accomplish real things, so I'm going to go in and mess up both sides and steal things and work for my own gain. Like, I don't understand how you consciously make that decision to do that.
I don't either.
And, I mean, the whole thing is, like, it's just like, okay, so we want to make this city a better place. We want to make it all better. We want everything to be fine. We don't want this to happen. We don't want that to happen. So our answer is to just destroy the city. That makes no sense.
Yeah. Logan's right. That doesn't make any sense. That's not going to help change anything.
Yeah. So, I guess the question is, what should we do? That's what the question a lot of people are asking themselves is.
Yeah. How do we fight this violence by select police officers without causing more violence in our communities that are already hurting?
Yeah.
Because the whole thing is, like, you can't, it's just such a hard question to answer. And I think if it was easy to answer, there'd already be an answer and it'd be taken care of.
Yeah.
It's not that simple.
Here's what I think. I think we just need to shut up and listen sometimes. Whatever side you're on, most people have taken sides by now. Listen to the other side. Get out of your Facebook bubble or your favorite news bubble and listen to the other side that's trying to speak what's on their mind. Both sides have valid points here. They always do, or else it wouldn't be such a big controversy. And we just need to listen to people's stories, listen to their lives, and it would just help us humanize other people more. Like, we would be less willing to kill and hurt other people if we saw them as actual human beings, like you were saying.
Right. That's a really good point.
We need to have adult conversations about this because nothing's going to be changed by throwing bricks at each other.
Yeah.
No.
Period.
Or yelling into a news camera. It doesn't work.
Nothing is going to be changed that way.
No.
We just get so sure of ourselves that we know what's right, that we don't have to listen to anybody else. We don't have to even look at the other side of the perspective.
And I think a problem is that lots of people are still super oblivious to the situation. Just like, oh, it's 2016. It's not actually that bad.
I think that was the largest opinion of America until 2 years ago.
Yeah,
3 years ago.
I mean, you just sit around and you ignore it and you just say, it's not actually happening. It's not that bad. It's not whatever. And then this is what happens.
It's one of those issues that is just so complex that it's ridiculous that people are just jumping up and taking arms over something like this without talking about it first. I think it's sad.
Well,
It is sad.
and the whole thing is like, the problem is it's always the gut reaction, because it's like a shooting will happen, someone will get killed, and then the people react almost immediately. The protest starts like within hours almost. And it just gets progressively worse. No one's even considering their actions, or at least not everyone is, and they're just jumping straight to worst case scenario, and this is the only thing we can do.
See, this is...
Yeah.
I think that the problems are there, for sure. But the justice system works, and it knows how to work. And yes, it needs a little better work. But if we just immediately start rioting and start throwing fits, we don't actually know what happened. Yeah. And with the protests that have happened before, we've had witnesses that say, oh yeah, I saw it and he didn't deserve to be shot and he was shot, and then we found out they weren't actually there. And we've had witnesses that were like, yeah, he deserved to be shot, and they weren't actually there and haven't seen anything.
Right.
So if we would just stop, let the justice system play out, and see what happens one time, because we haven't. And yet, maybe we need to work on the justice system. Maybe we need to...
Well...
But we don't know that because we've never let it play out. We just immediately start throwing things and yelling at each other.
The problem is that in the past, in cases like this, you can't exactly say the justice system has maybe worked out very well. So you can see how they might jump to conclusions very fast.
We're starting to see some of the court rulings on a lot of these things, and a lot of times the officers are either getting a slap on the wrist or getting fired, but they're not necessarily being brought up on criminal charges. When some of these cases, if it wasn't a police officer behind the gun, I think would be considered murder cases. And they're getting off as, very light manslaughter or just aggravated something.
That's the thing, right?
Killing.
You can't blame them when the justice system thus far doesn't appear to have worked for them.
It's true, but we also can't just start throwing things at each other before we actually do know what happened.
Yeah.
Right.
We have
because
to let
maybe the cop was right this time, or maybe he wasn't. But until we learn the facts, there's no reason to just yell at each other and throw things and be false witnesses and
Well, on the other side, I would say, whenever a cop gets hurt, I go on Facebook and look, and so many people are slinging around racial slurs, or they're making hasty generalizations about people groups, and that doesn't help either.
No, it doesn't.
Well, and
both sides act ridiculous like children.
I agree.
Sometimes.
They do.
We just need to listen. We need to wait, like you said.
And the problem is that there is, and this goes with what you're saying, I have a friend whose father is a police officer, and the second anything happens to a police officer, he immediately goes to, there's no way he did anything wrong. He's heard some of these cases, and he says, I don't think he did anything wrong. And I don't agree with him on a lot of that, but, because it's a police officer, he refuses to think that's even vaguely possible that he could have done anything wrong.
I think that happens on the other side, too. I think someone gets shot and the community says, there's no way he did anything wrong. A week later, once the justice system has collected some evidence, it comes out that, they were actually brandishing a weapon against a police officer, or something like that. That's just a made-up example.
Sometimes they didn't deserve to have the lethal force used, and sometimes it was required.
I guess a thing that always bothers me, I have seen videos on Facebook, YouTube, and everything of, police officers, even, with kids lately, straight up just handling children, 12 or 13-year-olds, super not right, straight up. There was a video of a police officer picking this girl up and practically just slinging her, across, not even properly, just
Yeah, I think I saw that video.
And he got fired, but the whole thing was, I think it was, there was two of them. One was this girl in a school class, and she was texting and wouldn't give up her phone. So his answer was to pick this girl up and sling her like a wrestler across the room.
See, that's way too far.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And that
She was a
deserves
middle
punishment.
school student. Like,
Right.
And
But
I,
on the same coin, my roommate showed me a video a couple days ago of a girl, I think she was 12 or 14, who was resisting arrest, a rightful arrest. She did something she should have been arrested for, was resisting arrest, and got maced by a cop. And people are up
See,
in arms. So this
that's-
was a little girl who got maced. But she, like, was kicking at the officers, ended up kicking one of the guy's body cams off and breaking it. I think she bloodied an officer's nose.
see,
Wow.
She
that's
was resisting arrest
understandable.
incredibly violently, so
And
they
I-
sprayed her with pepper.
But
Honestly, don't care if you're a child, if you're under 18, if you're a minor. If you break an adult law, you have adult consequences, and if you can hurt somebody,
well,
if you are an
and
active threat to someone's health and safety,
that's the
then you
thing.
need to
I
be-
think macing is even different than straight up picking someone up and
And
like
slamming
like he could have broken this girl's neck the way he was
For sure.
handling
he
her.
could have killed her. Macing, however, she'll be fine in a couple
Exactly.
hours. Yeah.
Like she's hurting right now, but guess what? She'll get over
she's
it.
subdued.
Yeah.
it sucks because it's this vicious cycle of tensions rising, and minorities are becoming more tense. Police officers are becoming more tense. People are scared on both sides of the other side, and so it just creates. There's always this tension whenever a new conflict arises, and people are scared, and they do stupid, unjustified stuff like this,
They do.
or the violent protests, or whatever it is that's causing all this anger to stir up in people. The anger itself sometimes is justified, but the actions used in fear and anger are not always justified.
Yeah.
Whenever we come from a place of fear, that's not when good things happen.
Yeah.
No.
That's when people get hurt because you're just trying to protect your own person. So you're afraid of community who's out protesting, and all of a sudden you see them as all criminals, and that's not what we want as protesters. That's not what we want as people being protested against.